In April 1912, the loss of the Titanic sent a shockwave across the globe. The pride of the White Star Line had foundered on her maiden voyage, taking more than 1,400 lives with her. At that exact moment, sitting on a slipway in Belfast, was the steel skeleton of her sister ship, Hull 433. The disaster forced a complete halt to construction. Instead of finishing the build as planned, the shipbuilders now had a blank slate. They went back into the blueprints and corrected every structural oversight that doomed the previous vessel. Hull 433, soon to be christened Britannic, was reverse-engineered against the physics of the Titanic's loss. Every measurement was a direct calculation designed to negate the specific failures of its predecessor. This diagram shows the first major defense mechanism, an inner skin. A secondary steel wall meant a glancing blow would only fill the dead space, leaving the interior dry. They also addressed the bulkheads, pushing the watertight walls up to B-deck. This ensured that even if multiple compartments flooded, the ocean could never spill over into the ship. On the top deck, they installed massive, electrically powered gantry davits. These towering cranes safely plucked lifeboats from the deck, swinging them far out over the water, even if the ship leaned heavily to one side. With these upgrades, the Britannic was calculated to stay afloat with 6 complete compartments open to the sea. Yet, on November 21, 1916, she struck a mine and sank in just 55 minutes, 3 times faster than the Titanic. How does a machine engineered specifically to survive catastrophic damage end up failing at triple the speed? By the time Britannic entered service, Europe was consumed by the First World War. Stripped of her luxury paneling, painted white and marked with enormous red crosses, she was deployed to the Mediterranean as a massive floating hospital. Her fate was sealed in the Kea Channel, off the coast of Greece, by a single threat left behind by a German U-boat, an underwater naval mine packed with 290 pounds of explosives. This schematic illustrates the immediate aftermath of the blast. The detonation sent a violent shockwave through the lower decks. The force was so severe that it physically bent the track of a crucial watertight door, leaving it permanently jammed open. Even with the explosion tearing a hole in the forward compartments and a door failing to close, the ship's heightened bulkheads were doing their job. She still possessed the buoyancy required to stay afloat. A single mechanical failure couldn't sink the ship. The fatal blow required a collision of bad luck and well-intentioned human error. To make the voyage more comfortable for the wounded soldiers they were preparing to board, the nursing staff had unlocked and opened the ship's lower portholes. They were trying to vent the oppressive Mediterranean heat from the wards. Here is where the physics of the failure took over. As the blast dragged the ship's bow downward, those open portholes dipped below the ocean surface. Water poured straight through the open windows, entirely bypassing the newly raised watertight bulkheads and flooding the upper decks from the inside. Up on the bridge, Captain Charles Bartlett made a desperate gamble. Believing the shores of Kea Island were close enough, he ordered the engines to full steam to try and beach the sinking vessel. But driving the ship forward only rammed thousands of tons of water into the hull at a faster rate. Because the ship was still pushing forward, her massive bronze propellers were still churning, even as the stern lifted out of the water. Against orders, panicked crew members launched 2 lifeboats early. They dropped into the wake and were instantly pulled directly into the thrashing blades. The effort to cool the sick wards let the ocean in. The attempt to beach the ship accelerated the sinking. The instincts meant to preserve life became the exact mechanisms that doomed the vessel and caused its most horrifying casualties. The world's largest hospital ship disappeared beneath the waves in under an hour. Yet out of the 1,065 people on board, only 30 perished. Once the engines were finally stopped, the engineering upgrades actually proved their worth. Those towering electric gantry davits functioned perfectly in the chaos, easily clearing the severe angle of the listing deck to safely deploy 35 lifeboats. The environment also offered a massive advantage. Unlike the freezing, isolated expanse of the North Atlantic, the Aegean Sea was warm. The ship went down in a high-traffic shipping lane, meaning local fishing boats and warships arrived to pull survivors from the water almost immediately. But the highest stroke of fortune was the ship's manifest. Britannic was on her way to collect patients. Her 3,300 hospital beds were entirely empty of the severely wounded soldiers who would have been unable to evacuate. The Britannic highlights the limits of what steel and logic can provide. While the shipbuilders successfully engineered a vessel to withstand the Titanic's fate, the survival of its crew ultimately hinged on the temperature of the sea and the luck of an empty hospital ward.